Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of My First Job, the podcast. We're privileged to have a veteran from the HR world. Sanmitra Trivedi has spent decades, and the places that he's worked in is like a who's who of international and Indian names. He has worked with Verizon and with Halliburton, and in India, he's managed HR for L&T and Reliance. Recently, Sanmitra started his own consulting firm into recruitment called Gentoro. And one of the interesting things that he's spoken about is how the Roman Empire is where the foundations of HR were actually laid. Let's bring Sanmitra on board and talk to him about his career journey. My name is Venugopal and I head Ideascape, an advertising and branding company. Good afternoon, Sanmitra. What a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hi Venu, good afternoon. It's really great to see you. I mean, after a long, long time, I still remember, all those good old days in
Yeah,
Verizon where you were of a great help to me when we were searching for a lot of, great creatives and great things that we wanted to do. So thank you very much.
thank
Great
you.
to be in touch with you after so much time.
Thank you. That's really kind of you, Sanmitra. So, we can, I think the best place to start is where, the early bits. So, can you tell me about what your childhood was like, where you grew up, and what is that defined you in the early stages?
So of course, I come from UP, so I was born and brought up there. Did my initial schooling till 12th, then got into KREC Suratkal, which is now called NIT Suratkal. Wanted to be away, though I was getting a seat in NIT Allahabad, but I wanted to traveling was my hobby.
Okay.
And then or you can say I wanted to be away from home either way, and I went to South. It was Suratkal in those days was like 3 nights, 4 days journey from my hometown, a
Wow.
place called Bareilly, and so that was fun. And you would turn back after semester, and you meet all the students there from different walks of life. It was really wonderful, great learning environment, great surroundings at the college with private beaches, and all
Right.
those kind of things. So it was a wonderful thing. From there, I came to Bombay. Got my first job in the college through campus with Mukund. In those days, it was Mukund Iron and Steel. Then it was called Mukund, and it used to be the largest secondary steel making plant after SAIL. And
Right.
so I came to Bombay, and that's where I was for almost eight and a half years actually. And then that was my formative year. Was lucky enough to have all the good bosses in my life, so that was wonderful to really place trust on me. And that's how I just started. And of course, I did my engineering. So I am basically, if you read my CV, you will almost feel like that somebody who lost his way and landed in HR. So mechanical engineering graduate, did my personal management, did my law also while working, and so somebody who kind of came in, of course, in HR. In those days, there were not many engineers in HR. In fact, I remember my
Exactly.
mother writing to me saying if you wanted to be in personnel, that's what it was called in those days. Then why
Right.
did you waste my money and 4 years in engineering and all? So I said fine. But I think it was truly calling for passion. On a serious note, I think I wanted to enjoy. I was enjoying. I found in my college days that I was more comfortable and enjoy talking to people than machine, because I always believed that being a mechanical engineer, the machines are supposed to exactly do how you design them to, but human beings are not. And
Right.
then life has taught me enough that at night 12 o'clock you sign a kacha paper saying all agreement done, and when you come
Right.
in the morning 8 o'clock you suddenly realize that two fellows are going in left and two are going in right. Typical Sholay style, and you have nobody behind you.
Okay, I guess this must be a slightly unusual experience for you because you're used to doing the interviewing all the time. But tell me, what was that first job interview like? Was it on campus, or do you remember some aspect of what happened, and why did you decide on Mukund? Obviously, Mukund is a very well-known company, but were there any other things that you considered at that point in time?
So the good part is that I must tell you that it is not about me doing interview. Interviewing basically, it's like the interviewer talks less and interviewee talks more, and exactly you are doing the same right now. So, so that can be put to debate as to who is a good interviewer. But yes,
Okay,
but I think the interview was interview in those days. Of course, those were not like fast-paced environment that you see today. So I mean,
right,
when I graduated from college, the campus interviews used to be two-day affair. So one day people will come do the written test. They will declare the result by evening. Next day they will have interview, and then they
right,
will go back and send the results. Rarely there were companies which used to announce it then and there. Otherwise, normally people will go back to headquarters and then they will send the result. Of course, as I was growing up the ranks, the 2 days became one day, and that's
right,
how it went. Now, of course, it is a little more difficult, a little more faster than what it was. But so it was a good interview. I think, of course, like any youngsters, you will be like. You will be worried and you will not know what the other person is thinking, and people will ask you saying, do you know somebody in Bombay, and where will you live in Bombay, and all those kind of things, because I was not from here. So of course,
okay,
as always, like a fellow, I said yes, I know somebody in Bombay. So that's a little lie I made myself to say that. I said I have one my mother's distant friend is there and all those things. So finally they took it up, and when I came to Bombay, of course I didn't know anybody except that distant friend who was as distant as it is now. And but the company gave me accommodation, company gave me appointment letter. So what I had when I
okay.
landed up here was a appointment letter and assurance for a bachelor accommodation, and that is where I started.
That's where all of us start. And you made one of the fastest transitions in about 7.5 years in Mukund. You went from management trainee to practically heading the HR. So, could you tell us something about what happened in the thing? What were the challenges, and what did you understand and put into practice at Mukund?
Good, good question. Let me try to say it in a very understated manner, because I don't want to sound coming out like a preacher. But the fact is that see, there is nothing called. I don't believe that there is something called work-life balance. It's all about work-life integration. So there were times, of course, those were. I was, as I said, and I really, genuinely, I mean that I was lucky enough to have bosses who were very kind. Uh, I was lucky enough to have bosses who placed their trust on me, and to say that, and right up to my last career up to Hitachi. So this privilege I had all the time, where bosses would place the trust and say, okay, Sanmitra, go and do whatever it is. I'm counting on you.
Right,
That was good enough for me to do. And of course, Mukund was a formative year. It was a great company. We had, I mean, there were times when I would go in the morning with my headlights on. I used to run bike in those days. Of course, I used to have train pass, and then my boss will be kind enough sometime to say that, okay, you can take the company car. We used to have pool cars, but many times you get up, you go with your headlights on because you want to attend a domestic inquiry, where the worker has to come in first shift, and you will continue till late night and return with the headlights on. I think what is really important is that that desire to kind of make something big. I think that was something which was a driving factor, because when I left my college, like a typical North Indian youngster's dream, I wanted to get into civil services. So when I got this job through campus for almost six months, I thought that I will run on two boats. But then I realized that in the corporate world, if you need to be successful, you can't really run on two boats. You have to decide. So this was a very hard decision at that point of time, to decide whether to have bird in hand versus two in Bush, and I said,
Right.
okay, I want to make a career in personal, and that's what I liked the job. And of course, those were also the time when a lot of interesting things are happening. Mukund was growing. We had the country was going through a lot of movement on quality, presentations, packings, and then it was all about my desire to basically say, okay, I want to excel. I want to do something great. I want to do something different. And instead of focusing on things that people spend time in gossiping, I would be focusing more on work and try to do that. And that's how it went. So I
Okay.
think that is the summary.
Yeah. Could you give me a couple of incidents? Obviously, working with a large labor force presents its own set of challenges. So, do you remember something that you learned from things that you implemented to ensure that there were changes, or it brought about a certain amount of efficiency in the company?
So as a head of HR, I have been now head of HR from '97, so almost like close to 24 years. I was head of HR, and I can tell you that every mandate except one was very very clear for me that what I am expected to achieve. And of course, when people hire you as a CXO, it's very clear that there is always the expectation from the role, and
Right.
where there was no expectation, I had created my expectations. So at the end of the day, when everything is done, I would be asking two questions to my interviewer, whoever that person was, and say my hiring manager. And one question was that, what is that you expect me to do? Uh,
Okay.
Number one, and number two question was that, what are those two three things that if not done over a period of 1 year, 2 year, whatever is your time frame, then you will say that hiring you was a bad decision. So I think that was a very it became a very insightful question for me, particularly because what happens, you don't have to ask, like today, we are a consulting firm, we also run talent acquisition, executive search, and a lot of people are saying, what will you do? So you tell somebody that, okay, you will be the CHRO or you will be the CTO, and they say, okay, what is the job description?
Right.
So sometimes I get little kind of perplexed and amused because if you are a CTO, then you are a CTO. I mean, if you are a CHRO, you are a CHRO. There is nothing left in the job description. You
There's
decide
no
your
ambiguity
job.
about that. Okay.
Absolutely. So I think in those time, these questions did help me to ask, basically get a serious point as to why employer is hiring you, and that also gave me a view to say that how do you want to really whether I can do that job, I cannot do the job, do I find it hard, do I find it tough. But normally, of course, from boss's side it was very clear, from my side also it was very clear, but it always good to have those expectations set, because each job you come with a mindset, right? So there are certain jobs which may not challenge me enough, there are certain jobs which may challenge. So I think that's how it kind of helped me to ask those questions very precisely, saying,
Get the
what are those
answers.
two
Okay.
three things that you would like me to do? If not done, you will consider me a bad hire. So that gave a very
Okay.
good view, saying how what I am supposed to do after joining.
Okay. So, in a factory, in was Mukund highly automated at the time, or were there a fair amount of processes that had to be? What is this? The total, let's say, labor strength and the managerial strength in Mukund at the time?
So of course, see, the as any great company, and Mukund had in those time, had some of the great leaders, very very qualified, somebody who have kind of who have high degree of by academics and high state of achievements, and so the it was never a kind of, it was always, it was a great company, and you had very very qualified experienced leaders who understood their job. Automation is always very relative term. So of course, when you have a steel plant, you have to
Right.
have a fair amount of automation, because when you cut that billet, you don't want
Right.
it to run after workers or people. So
Right.
it has to run perfect well in its track. So it has the automation, and it was a good automation, I will say, because at the end of the day, the degree of automation changes, but the concerns don't change. So the concern is like, if you have to take care of employee safety, if you have to take care of employees welfare, you need to do that. So in fact, I remember when we had a total quality management, and I was secretary of personal quality council, and because of my engineering background, I led a project in safety called reducing burn injuries in the steel melt shop, and that project won the national symposium award. It won the Asian Symposium Award, and I remember giving that presentation to in the Crystal Room Taj, and there were almost like 140 chief executives and MDs and chairmen were sitting there, and it came out as the best results because from 73 days we hold on to zero and held it for 18 months. And of course, that was the
Okay.
first time when I was interviewed by Economic Times. So yes, it was a great company, great leaders. I think I owe a lot to them and to many others. But I think because what happens, they were formative years, you are more grateful because they are the
Right.
ones who set you on track, and then after that, life is always a learning. So it was a great experience I had. Great
Okay.
experience, great gratitude.
So, how did the move out of Mukund happen? What was the next move that you made in terms of a career, and what was going on through your mind at that point?
So, okay. So the point is that, see, if I look at it, I'm little sometimes hesitant when to talk about myself more, but please bear with me. So these little bit of hesitation is because of that. But see, when I was in Mukund, I was by God's grace and the growth, I had one of the fastest growth in
Right.
terms of, so what people will typically achieve in 15 years, if they are inside, they achieved in 7.5 years. I was well liked and regarded, so right up to the chairman of the company, and I learned a lot of things from them, and still I practice those things. So that was wonderful. But what happens that, see, you have to decide at some point of time. So when they say, that you own a career, now what that really means is that everyone has to think for themselves as to what they want out of their career. Now, that does not mean, I'm not saying that people should leave job, people should not leave job. That's a very different personal decision, depends on personal circumstances. But what really matters is that everyone has to set a career plan for itself. So what happens that, when probably whatever I did there, and I'm not reading out my CV here, but whatever I did, I realized that you always have a growth and you have a plateau, and then you have a
Right.
growth. So the question is, when you do hiking, and if you are with your fellow colleagues, and you try to do a hiking where you reach the little less than cliff faster, you have to wait. You have to wait for
Right.
others to come and catch up with you. You can't suddenly be on the mountain cliff leaving all your colleagues besides, because your guide will not allow you to do that. He'll say, okay, you are fast, you wait there, I will come. Let others come. So I
Right.
think that is where probably one has to think, saying, okay, what I learned versus what I could have learned, how long, kind of waiting, and then I got this great opportunity with Philips, and I thought that why not take it up, though I had no reason to leave, very honestly speaking. But
Right.
it was like, okay, fine, I did my contribution, I learned. 8.5 years was a good time, and Philips was looking for something, and then I said, okay, I'll go there. So that's how it went. So nothing
Okay.
bad, nothing good, but I think I did my learning a little faster, I would say.
Okay. So it's interesting. So Philips, the electronics company, right? So
Yeah,
what was the difference that you noticed from a manufacturing setup to a factory that was into electronic components? What was
so
the difference in culture?
So it was, of course, I was part of Origin. So in Origin was a software company which is owned by Philips to the 86%. Philips owned, and they had great plans of converting into. They wanted to outsource their IT project of Philips to this Origin. Now it is called Atos Origin, but in those days it was Origin, and they also had a lot of projects which they wanted to do. So the idea was to make this whole Origin as a great IT shop which is outsourced work of Philips, as well as whatever interesting thing they were doing.
Okay.
And one of the culture things, of course, we used to have fun in Mukund also. I mean, so we would have fun, we will have dinners, but I think once you join MNC, it's a different level of things. So I was very culturally, I think, when somebody said, okay, I want to interview people, and my boss said, MD, and of course, then my head of HR said that, okay, let's make a schedule. So that was my first point to say that how systematic and organized it is, where you write ABC at 8:55 and MNP at 8:20 and PQR at 8:50. I think that was something, and then writing report and after report and trying to make the very systematic plan neatly
Right.
well done on a piece of paper. I think that was a new learning for me. I will say at that point of time. Because I mean, Mukund
Okay.
used to say, okay, get this done, get this done. You have whatever basic papers you need to have, but focus is on getting it done. But nobody bothered that, if you're going to interview 20 people, then have an interview schedule of that. I mean,
Okay.
I did it in.
So, what part of engineering and law have you found is useful in managing HR as a function?
I think it was very useful. Now, of course, you see a lot of engineers into HR function. And when I started,
Right.
not many. I mean, I remember my one friend who is still working as a CHRO. He was doing his management from TESS, and we would often cry on each other's shoulder to say how outnumbered we are as an engineer, and nobody kind of otherwise nobody is there. So not many engineers were there, but I really found one thing which is there in HR, which was helpful, is that once you work in a manufacturing environment, or once you work, preferably mostly in a manufacturing environment, one is that, see, all this education gives you a flavor. So if you are an engineer, it is understood that you will be more analytical because you have been trained like this. So
Yeah.
what happens with that engineering background? If there is an engineering problem or engineering discussion, you suddenly don't feel yourself out of odd. I'm not saying that non-engineers will not be. Depends on their
Right.
interest. So if the non-engineers also can be very much interested in engineering subject, but if you're an
Right.
engineer and if you have the intellectual curiosity, you have a more interest to say. You will not feel that, okay, this is not my subject, and kind of thing. And then second thing is, you also get that confidence in those days, when there were not many engineers in HR or personnel, to say that, look, if I was not into personnel, I might have been sitting and managing the shop. So let's get serious on certain things. So I think that's where I think engineering did help in terms of technical knowledge, in terms of analytical mind, and law is law. So of course the point is, it does help. I mean, before I did my law, and it came out because I was part of the negotiating committee in Mukund. Of course, I was not negotiating, but I was the blue-eyed boy of my boss. So my job was to carry files and sit in those meetings behind when a MD and head of finance, head of HR will be negotiating, or head of
Right.
works. But I think sitting behind those negotiation meeting did help me understand quite a lot of things, and I think that changed my life perspective. So I was what I used to do, since I used to know computer, which I learned. So I will come back and then I will go and make some changes, saying, okay, DA change 1 rupee here, this allowance change this paisa here. But one thing was, which was very good, was that at that young age, I learned that in a big corporation which employs 8,000 people, that's how Mukund used to employ, including contract, a difference of 25 paisa can basically make a difference of 50 lakhs to you. So
Okay.
that appreciation that something is small and get this done can really mean a lot of money in the context of corporation, was something which I learned in Mukund. And I think that was a lifelong learning, and it did help me. So when I was in Finolex as a CHRO and president, somebody came to me saying, we want to give this 10,000 rupees as a long service award on 25 years of service. So I said, what do we do now? No, we give this gift of 5,000 rupees and we give this block, and I want to give 25,000, something like that, he said. And then I said, I asked my team to give me data of people who will be completing 25 years, say in next 3 years. And I
Right.
realized that what was a problem of, 1 lakh rupees or 2 lakhs rupees, I don't remember. It became an issue of 1.25 crore. So I went to the executive chairman. I said that, are you signing up to this 1.25 crore? I have signed it. I was under pressure, but I don't want you to sign up. And
Right.
that was like, I mean, he realized, he said 1.25 crore. No, no, no. But you should have thought. I said, I have thought. That's why I'm here with you. If I had not thought, I would not have been there. So what I'm saying is understanding that those minor things can mean big in the context of corporations is something that I have seen. A lot of time people come back. I know in my career, the last minute when you are about to rush for your home, people will come to you with something saying, "Okay, can I do this?" And I'm always wary of that. Say, "No, no, no, wait, we'll do it tomorrow."
So no one needs to come to you at the last minute and expect that you will suddenly give
Yeah,
an
I mean,
approval in the heat of
happiness
the
you can
moment.
just sign it. So it's like this. So
No,
So that's the thing. But I think that was a great learning that I had. And that's where it helped me. The law helped me quite a lot in my
yeah,
background in Mukut. That's where I learned in my Bangladesh when I was setting up the gas plant, which was set up. We had a lot of things. Then I was on HR committees of Middle East for Halliburton or anywhere in NCR. It did help. So basically, law is a highly technical subject. And I
okay,
started appreciating it only when I started reading. And I got
right,
its reading. I started doing it because when I was in those negotiation thing, I would hear in those days the union leaders used to be, kind of legal graduate lawyers, and they will talk saying, "Mr. So and so, you are in violation of 9A." Now, if you don't
right.
understand what 9A is, then it doesn't work. You are under, I will recover it under 39C2. Now, I don't understand what 39C2 is. So I started with that, but I realized that it's a highly technical subject, and I think I loved. My language became perfect after doing my law because
Okay,
when you start understanding law not from a purpose of reading, then you start understanding that what is murder and what is culpable homicide and amounting to murder and what is culpable homicide. So I think that
right.
fine word really makes a
Is
difference. I think law did make a lot of difference to me as a person, and I learned quite a
okay,
lot. It helped me quite a lot as I managed.
okay. There's another thing which I think you may have glossed over, but the fact that law, uh, two things, those learnings I think were huge. Like you said, 25 paise leads to what I can infer from that is that you were thinking like an entrepreneur already. Because if if people look at what is the cost involved, they're normally looking at it in their own context. Whereas you looked at what it would mean for the company as a whole. The second question that I want to dwell upon in terms of law, did your knowledge of the law also help you understand how to assess the problems related to corporate law or anything that you had to handle? Obviously, it would have helped.
Yeah, so yes, to answer your second question, which is easier, it does help because what happens that with that knowledge you are able to understand what may seem like a potential issue today, a minor problem could blow up into a bigger problem. So that's something which I got good sense from a law. So sometimes people will come back but you understand when you see those issues that what is looks like is small today but will become very big tomorrow. So you better
Okay.
handle it now, nip it in the bud. That is number one. Number two, it does help you in understanding people because when somebody kind of you deal with a
Yeah.
lot of time, right? So there are times when you understand, oh, now there is a legal smell coming, so there is something you need to be careful. I know one
Yeah.
fellow, kind of suddenly said that you are discriminating me. So I said, oh my God, there's something going different. So I told him, sit down here. I said, close the door. And then after that, I told him what all I did for him, which does not amount to discrimination. And I told him, now get lost, do whatever you like. I'll fire you if you don't improve. So do it faster. So you understand, you get that appreciation. So definitely it does help. Uh,
Yeah. And then the first question, thinking like an entrepreneur, how did you see your job, not just in your terms of your role, but in terms of how it would work out for the company as well? Did you think that that was one of the important learnings that you got?
Very good question, and I think I would like to. I may sound like a professor, but I would still like to profess. See, a lot of time I see and I have seen youngsters, young professionals, even the people in their 30, 35, whatever it is, but it's a habit which starts when you are 25. See, lot of people make a mistake of compartmentalizing their thinking. I have seen it. So I have seen a lot of my colleagues, or a lot of professional colleagues, who will sit down in meetings, but the moment a technical problem is being called, their mind will be switch off. The
Okay.
moment hiring is called, the antenna is super up. The moment attrition is called, antenna is super up. But when a business problem is being discussed, you say it's not my problem. Not because of they don't have understanding; they have understanding. They have more than required intelligence. So it is none of those issues. It's just simply a matter of interest, saying this is my job. So I'm supposed to take care of employee life cycle. Anything which is outside it, it's not my problem. So that's the kind of thing. I was lucky enough to have that mindset from my beginning of the career, where I always looked at a problem in holistic. I never looked at myself that I am a personal officer or I am a head of HR or I am that. I always looked at, if I sat in the meeting, I was listening with full attention all the meeting. I could definitely say if I have any comments to make, I may not make it generally, but I may tell the boss nearby to say that, look, this is what I feel. Do you think the same way? Or if I want to understand something which I didn't understand, I will go and ask him privately, saying, what do you mean by that? So, what happens
Right.
that the broader outlook that you have and the broader picture you have, it helps you to not only develop but also pick up many learnings from other walks of life which your profession may not give you. So, I
Okay.
think that is something which I would say myself,
Which
I was
okay.
lucky enough to have that.
You have traversed through industries in several um, sectors. You've handled oil and gas, you've handled telecom, you've handled infrastructure. So is HR the same, or do you feel that what were the, let's say, foundational rules that you would have for recruitment and how you would assess people?
So, see, my take is and my experience is that HR is a transportable skill. See, at the
Okay.
end of the day, I have laughed this many times with my bosses and colleagues when I was in the job, that I am yet to see an employee who says that he's overpaid, including me. So everyone by default is underpaid. Everyone needs to get promoted, which they should have been promoted yesterday, but I think their boss delayed. So I think
Yeah.
those basic fundamental rules of human management and employee things don't change. So that remains irrespective of the industry you are in. Of course, if you are in oil and if you are in upstream oil and gas, people will talk to you how working in North Sea is difficult versus Red Sea, and how how they need to have more day off back home. If you are working in a very sophisticated IT industry, people will say that look how hard the job is. But I think the basic rules of human management remains the same. So that is one fundamental thing. I think what is
Right.
required is at a leader's level, whether it's a HR leader, and I will talk about HR leader because that's what I have been. See, we need to understand that once these fundamental human pursuits and the wishes and wants are the same, question is the nuances of dealing with them differs from
Right.
industry to industry, culture to culture. So for me, it was always like I never walked in any place thinking that I know all. In fact, I will always tell my boss also saying I don't know anything. I'll just go and come and learn and see what it is. And I spent 2 3 months trying to understand what it is, trying to learn from everyone, whether it's a assistant manager or general manager, to say, okay, how do you your business, what do you do? But I think in those 2 3 months, you understand what is needed to be done, how the organization works, what are the real issues that you need to handle as a HR leader, and then you are ready to get
Okay.
into your action. Because
Okay.
organizations by default are not what the organization structure looks like. So if
Okay.
there is a 20% organization is through org structure, then 80% organization is through its network structure. And if you really want to make any change, you need to understand that. So
Right.
I think that's where it goes.
So, when you're hiring for senior roles or versus entry level, do you think there's a difference in how you would obviously spend a lot more time with people who are going to take up positions of much greater responsibility, but what were some of the things that you would look for?
So when you're hiring a fresher or a young professional, you know that there is not much in terms of career credentials that you have. So you need to really look them for potential. You need to look with them that what are those attributes that your company needs. Do they have it? Or what the attributes that a job needs? Do they have it? If the job
Right.
requires, I was working in one other company and where it was a 92 city presence, and one of the customer engineer we had, and we set up that customer engineer almost like a across the country. And that person, because he could not do the work in the night, he just slept on a cardboard in that ATM room, and next day morning he fixed the problem and came. Now that's something which you call and you appreciate people what it is. So I think each job requires certain skills, and when you are looking at young professional, you do look at it. Do they have theoretical background? Do they have, if not theoretical background, whatever they need to have required skills and knowledge do they have? And then after that, do they have the required personality attributes to happen to that job? So I think that is what goes where you place a lot on potential. Sometimes you take a bet on people also. So you sometimes say, okay, fine, let me try and see how does it go. But you take a bet on people, and I have seen that people don't surprise you sometimes. I mean, they really follow what it
Right.
is. When you
Right.
come to the senior level, while the attributes remain the same, so if you are in a culture, if you have an organization or a culture where it has to be very fast paced, it is very ambiguous. You really can't get somebody by personality, which is like very organized, very methodical. Look for every page of report before they come back. So you need to, of course, look at those personality matches to see. But in a senior level, still it is easier to that extent because you have some background, and they say that past behavior is indicative of future performance. So it is easy to look at past to predict what the future will generally look like if the other attributes matches,
Right.
and culturally those personality matches.
Okay. You made this point that the Roman Empire, you said that when you were preparing for a
Yeah.
talk, you looked at the Roman Empire and then said there that they had great HR policies. And your point was that there was no question of reporting, and you appointed a person, and that person had to represent the empire. So, what is your take on that? What exactly did you uh, mean?
So what I meant was that see, as the what is happening is that and not happening, it has already happened to some extent that
Right.
while technology has I was in a store 2 years back, and somebody wanted to give a discount. I think I was with my wife and she wanted some discount, so that person wanted to get some additional 5% discount or 3% discount, something I don't remember. And it was almost like 15 minutes, so I asked him saying, what are you doing, why can't we move, what is the issue? So he said, no, sir, now we have a system, so everything is under system. So this, it is more than certain percentage, so I have to go. And it was not five even, it was less than five or five. And then, I have to
Okay.
go to the headquarter, and headquarter has to approve. So on one side, and this is true, right? I mean, the point is
Right.
that getting, with the technology, as the things have become more easily controllable, the chances are that the authority, autonomy to decide on a job has come down to some extent. This is my senses. I'm not saying there may be exceptions to it, but by and large, I see that the technology sometimes is desired to have more control, and that's something which kind of is there. So when the lot of in 90s, you would see the bosses will travel everywhere, so they'll be there every week for you. I'm talking on an MNC environment, and they'll say, no, we want to come and see how things are, because they don't want to let go anything, and then they will say, okay, CC me on that. I think probably if you look at it, when they starting of the career, when there are no great emails, you are boss will guide you. You can at best send the things and goes away. But I think when the CC culture came, I remember some of my colleagues asking me from different functions saying that, don't you think I have something to add? I said, of course you have. So please CC me. I will give you some input. So that was a starting point which I saw where it will get. But today, if you see, the poor one fellow is in two, and there are 20-25 people in CC. And of course,
Right.
last few years, of course, things are changing where people are saying that, okay, don't put me on a CC and this and that. But somewhere the autonomy part goes there. So what I really wanted to say about that Roman Empire story is that in good old days when there was no technology, you can't really make a pretension of controlling anything. So you can't
Yeah.
say that, if there is a problem, you phone me up, or okay, if there is something, I'm just 2 hours away. I'll come. I'll just fly down.
Yeah.
I've had bosses telling me sometimes saying, "Don't worry, I'll just
Right.
fly down." So and that in that when you have such a vast empire, then your all ability that your empire will expand or contract depend on that person whom you hire and then send him to manage that area. And that is what I wanted to say, that im- importance of human resources is not something which is 20-year-old or 30-year-old. I think it has always been there, and it was, in fact, it has more stake there, because that time once you see somebody going away, once you hire, it is gone. You only know whether you keep that territory or you lose that territory.
Okay. Great. Now, the difference between global organizations which have, you worked for companies that have billions of dollars in revenue. Now, the thing is, do you get the feeling at times that uh, while you put systems in place, there is always a question of is this manageable beyond a point? Or is it that, do you feel that organizations which are at 150, 200 people in the small stages have a better grip on what is happening internally? Whereas as you go bigger and spread across geographies, it gets down to uh, evaluating reports and making assessments from that alone, and personal what do you say, interactions get few and far between.
See, I used to think that way, Venu, when I was young. So I would often remember, that how come my boss remembers this? So he will say, after 3 months, he used to, I was in 25, he will be around, maybe 53,
Right.
54. And I'll say, how can he remember that? What happened to this and what happened to that? So I used to think it's exceptional memory, but I realized that it is not true. As you grow older, you realize that it is not that way. I don't know if my team thinks that way right now about me. So this concept of Harold Jenin of ITT, that was
Right.
a time when, of course, he wrote that book and he used to manage by, only by reports and reading reports. I think that has long gone away. My experience of I have been privileged to work with some of the uh, accomplished, globally known bosses, both in India as well as outside India. And I've had a privilege of personally know them, because I was managing those territories which are very important to them at that point of time. So I
Right.
would often be called to headquarters and ask questions saying that, how you are doing, what are you doing, what's your strategy, etc., etc. And I have realized that uh, and I was in my 30s and 40s that time, and but I realized that they were as grounded as they can be, and it is not about being distant away. I think it depends on what you are doing and how it is, and how it is in the line of priority. So when something is under focus, it is on priority. So I would say that people at that level, and I have dealt with chairman of almost like four companies, and personally, and I have known, and they know exactly what is happening, and you'll be surprised sometime before you go, saying they know more about you than what you know.
Yeah. What about the culture between Indian companies and companies abroad? You've had a chance to work at extremely large companies in both the Indian sector as well as, so is there something that you see as a difference?
Uh, Little difference, not much difference. Also, it may sound like diplomatic, but I'm being very honest with you. See,
Okay.
if you go to, I remember making a presentation to the chairman of Verizon, and I was given precise 7 minutes to say that your time starts at 5:40 p.m. ends at 5:47,
Okay.
and so you go that precise to say that, okay, fine, where do we go? And
Okay.
it's like this, so it can be very precise, to the point, big level picture, because if they want to get deeper, maybe they may not get into deeper, so that's a different
Right.
management style. Coming back to if you come to say Indian companies, I have had privilege of working with Mr. A.M. Naik. He used to be my second level manager. Mr. MDA was my second level manager. You know, other bosses also were equally accomplished, whom with I
Right.
worked, and they can be, they may know fairly very much what is happening. Of course, the sometime the tendency in India could be that okay, fine, I want to get more involved, but nonetheless, that what happens in a big MNC environment is that they may say, okay, fine, you decide, you make a decision and you bear the brunt of the decision. That means that, you know, you make it. If you don't make it, you are fired. That's the kind of culture it can come in. So that gives you more responsibility. And since I
Right.
have been a beneficiary of it in terms of my early growth because of this burden rest on me early in life. But here
Right.
it can be like, okay, fine, you know, we want to know because we don't want you to make mistake. So, but
Okay.
then otherwise, I won't say much of difference. Of course, you need to respect your boss, whichever country, whichever culture, whichever chair it is. The bosses, you know, when you walk into a boss's room, it can be as powerful, and the
Yeah.
silence can be as deafening as it can be anywhere. So, I have
Right.
not seen personally any great difference between walking in India or walking in US or walking in London or Australia. Nothing. No, no difference.
Right. Right. So, looking back on a career in HR, I've not gone individually into each company, Sanmitra, because I was trying to
That was a
get
good
an
thing you did.
understanding
I
of.
would have been very embarrassed because if you were interviewing me privately, I would have told you tens of things.
No,
So
this is
my
not.
penchant for privacy is kind of, you know, so it's good that you didn't go there. Good. Thank you.
No, and see, the thing is that I thought early on you figured out one is that from what I understand in our discussion so far, you uh, early on you figured out the big picture and you figured out what was necessary for the organization itself to progress, which is why the responsibilities just kept increasing. And then you went from Indian multinationals to foreign. Now, what is it that you see? One is that you said compartmentalization, that you've seen some people say that this is not my job, this is my job. So, what are some of the other characteristics that you think are important when you want to rise and do well in your chosen field of specialization?
So, with due respect, I will just correct you that it is not about, it is not my job and this is my job. It is about creating a mental boundary that this is not my function.
Okay.
So, I
Okay.
switch off because somebody
Okay.
is talking about their business problem, but I don't care
Right.
because it's not HR, right? So, I will only worry
Okay.
about when there is a word on
Yeah,
attrition
I
or
get the nuance. Yeah,
that's the kind
absolutely.
of point. So
Okay.
one is that having a, yes, you are right, bigger bigger mindset, trying to understand. See, I always believe on two saying which I always did, and I have said this earlier also, so it may be repetition sometime. But one is that three saying. One is that always keep your human touch. So never do to others what you would not like to be done for yourself. That is
Right.
number one rule that you should follow. Number two is you are as great as you think you are. So as you think, so you become. So if you
Right.
think that you are a CEO, you'll become CEO. If you think you are head of HR, you'll become head of HR. So a lot of
Right.
people, what happens that, and it is, I don't think it is an Indian culture, but sometimes you know what happens that being ambitious and working towards that ambition is always a good thing to have. And a lot of people, I would say that sometime you know we kind of get little this thing, so you know saying that okay, this is my boss's job, why should I think? But the point is, as long as I'm not signing on my boss's behalf and deciding ordering troops to march on my boss's behalf, I have full freedom till that point to basically think that way and make a suggestion to the boss. And I
Right.
met to see a boss or a colleague of mine who didn't like the good subordinates. So
Okay.
my message to the audience is that every boss wants a good subordinate. So if you are a good assistant, and assistant does not mean carrying briefcase, but if you are a good, really good assistant, if you understand how your boss will think, you try to solve the problem. Up to that time, you can definitely think and act till you ask the troops to, you know, march the
Right.
order. I think everyone would love that. This also gives you opportunity to expand your horizon, and that is what is really needed. Because if you get into a role, you need to have these are the opportunity which gives you preparation for the next role.
Okay. Great. So, how did Gentoro come about? You've had stints with some of the largest companies, and then you were literally saying, "I'll start from scratch." And obviously, given the way you operate, you've already expanded and set up operations in the US as well. So, what drove the starting up of Gentoro?
Good question. So actually, after I have been head of HR for almost like 24 years. So I
Right.
thought that, and I have almost like six companies. So I said, okay, fine. More or less, while the nuances, the role may change, but the role remains what it is. And I thought that time that only one thing is left, which was like I can where I can tell my grandkids whenever they happen that your I tried this and failed. So that was on a lighter side that I said, okay, I want to do something, and I wanted to really get into. May sound very idealistic, but I think at some point of time, I was talking to a colleague and he said, "Why don't you start now?" Because I said, "Okay, maybe after retirement, I will see if I can
Right.
set up." And he said, "You should start now." So that time I kind of laughed at it, but I slowly started. I basically started with a view to serve a lot of small companies because I see that a lot of SMEs and companies do have, I think they need HR more than the big companies because big companies have a lot of resources, both in terms of human resources, in terms of human resource capability, in terms of people and money. So I thought that I can use my knowledge of HR to help those companies because if you look at it in India also, if India has to grow, I mean the focus is definitely shifted towards this part of the country, this part of the world, and then companies have to grow. So that was my initial thought process, and I thought that okay, fine. Once you have made sure that you can have enough of roti dal, then let's try this venture. So that's how I started. I started with consulting, got into services. Then at some point of time, I thought that I will be definitely taking it to international. But then at one point of time, I thought that what is that right time when I will say that I will go international. And I
Right.
thought there is no right time, there is no right to say that okay, I achieve this, then I go there. So I reached to a size where I can say that, and with the clientele, I said okay, I can definitely look at the international market. So that is where last year I went to US, met a lot of my friends. I have been for 17 years. I was head of HR for American companies in this part of the world. So I have a lot of friends uh, in different part of the world and in America. So I went there and I said, okay, let me start the entity there. So we have started. We have few clients, and idea is basically to serve a lot of people. Even today, I don't think that commerce drives us as much as service drives us, and I genuinely mean that. So I am, in fact, my team will testify that I am more sympathetic to some of the SME sector than on a big company. I'll say,
Okay.
okay, let's do it, let's do that. So, yes, the idea is to kind of, yes, I have left a job at a time when I want to create something. But only time will tell. I can only do hard work, and rest God has to
Yeah.
decide.
No, but I think you've had a very clear uh, line of thinking on where you ought to progress next, and that is evident in the kind of moves that you've made right through your career. Uh, we've almost spent an hour. So, in conclusion, I'd like to ask you how you look at, what kind of advice would you give to people who are entering the business, not just in HR, but how they should perceive a career?
This is for those who are entering into business.
Ye- or yeah, entering into a job and
Okay. Because
yeah.
entering into business is like a high school boy trying to tell a fifth standard boy, saying that what you should do, how should you grow your career. So
Yeah.
I don't think I have reached to the level where I can really advise somebody how to be good at business. So absolutely, I am a pal and buddy. But on the job, I'll definitely say that one is that look, there is nothing called work-life balance. It is all about work-life integration. So that means that in life you will have a time when your work will need to be prioritized, and there are times when your life has to be prioritized over work. And I think as long as we get these two things, it is perfect. It's never going to be 9 to 7, 9 to 6, and that's not a work-life balance. That is number one. Number two, keep a very, very broader mindset. Don't just shut, don't just ignore things because it is not part of your expertise. So if you are a technical person, if some discussion is happening in HR, don't ignore it because you don't know all that knowledge when it could be of use to you. And if you are in HR and somebody is discussing business problem, please listen to it. And number two is have that service mindset. How can you help others to succeed? It may sound very idealistic, but actually it is not. It is a absolute honest business proposition. It works. So if you have that service mindset and desire to help, it just works. Because then what happens? You get more opportunity to try different things. And in life, learning is only by trying. The more you try, the more you exert your brain, the more you take the risk pocket. But that risk means you are, whenever you are not sure that what the outcome will be, but you have your bosses who can back you up. I think that's where it is. So this is what I will say. Will take people and manage your career in terms of what you want out of life. What do you want out of
Okay.
life?
Terrific. So, in what is it that is there? Are there a couple of points that you really recall, which are, from your point of view, uh, sort of defined what you want to do in life? It could be something that happened long ago. It could be something that happened of recently. But is there some incident that still stays top of mind with you?
So I think, of course, in such a long life, of course, somebody who is 20 years senior will not say so, but I think still I can say 30 plus years, and if you are 50 plus, it's a long life. I think there have been many defining moments, but uh, one thing which is very clear that I chose, and since it is my first job, so I think I would definitely like to pass this message to youngsters that I think the first one was that I chose passion. Now I can say that maybe 20 years back I was not in a position to say, but I think
Right.
because I was not knowing what the life will take. But having reached mid stage in life, I can definitely say that I chose my passion, and passion was dealing with people. And that is where then I said, okay, fine, I will forget the conventional wisdom of being a production engineer, a maintenance engineer, and let's take a risk. And some of my friends who are there, they would recall many of those discussions where I have told them that in those days it used to look like as if I have jumped from one mountain cliff to another while they were on there. So all of us are successful in our own rights, and but still, I think choose the passion is one, and second is having a service mindset does work. It does not mean that you are allowing yourself to be exploited, but it only means that from a position of strength you are there to help others, and in that process you learn a lot. And I think at the end of the day, 10 years down the line to the youngsters, what you carry in your brain is what you carry. People pay you for that, and that can only come by experience, by working on problem, trying and failing. Of course, ensure that you don't fail too often, and of course there are ways to do that.
Right. Thank you very much, Sanmitra. It's been a real pleasure. And it's wonderful to go down back on memory lane with you of all the various jobs you did, the companies you worked in, and the experience that you've accumulated. Let me wish Gentoro a wonderful innings. And
Okay,
like you said, the service mindset.
I will only say one thing. You have made me speak a lot about me. Of course, that was also the intent of the podcast. But I want to genuinely. I have not forgotten those help that you gave it to me in terms of. I think in those days when we are trying to set those branding, trying to set the whole stuff in Verizon in the beginning. The way you help and the kind of creatives, the kind of ideas and kind of things, I think I have not forgotten, and I want to convey all my gratitude to you. I have not
Thank
forgotten.
you. Thank you, Sanmitra. It was
Really,
always a pleasure
genuinely.
working with you because I think you had a very clear idea of what you wanted, and that always helps.
No, thank you. Thanks, Vinay. Thank you very much. So kind of you. Thanks.
Okay,
Thank
wonderful
you. Bye.
being with you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
That was Sanmitra Trivedi, CHRO and founder of Gentoro, a long and accomplished life in HR, managing the culture and the background of several organizations. Thank you for joining us on this particular episode and this journey. Next week, we'll be back with another guest, another career journey, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, as always, for listening.